She only wanted help with her missing check. What she got was thrown into the rain by a bank she trusted for 43 years. An 81-year-old woman, a viral video, and one unexpected witness, Keanu Reeves. But why him? And what secret from her past would change everything? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain fell in heavy sheets over Briarwood, the kind of spring morning that chilled the bones and made sidewalks shine like mirrors. Evelyn Moore tightened her coat around her frail frame as she stepped off the bus near Briar National Bank. Her umbrella wobbled in the wind, barely shielding her from the downpour. At 81, every step carried a quiet ache. But today wasn't a day for weakness. Her pension check hadn't arrived, and she was out of options. She paused before entering the bank, eyes on the glass doors. Inside, young professionals tapped on smartphones, dry and warm in their tailored coats. Evelyn adjusted her scarf, then stepped inside. The warmth of the lobby greeted her like an old friend, but her soaked shoes squeaked across the marble floor, drawing a few glances. She took a deep breath. She had prepared for this. She had her bank book, her ID, her handwritten notes. She even brought the tattered envelope where the check usually arrived. Everything in order, she told herself, even as pain throbbed through her knees. Her last heart pill had been taken 2 days ago, and she felt the tension rising in her chest. Evelyn joined the line. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nerves but from the arthritis that had grown worse each year. A young woman in front of her gave a distracted smile before turning back to her phone. Evelyn didn't take offense. She knew how invisible old people became in places like this. She glanced at the wall clock. 20 minutes passed. Her legs begged for a seat, but the only bench was full. Still, she waited patiently, clutching her small brown purse like it carried her lifeline. And in a way, it did. "Next customer, please," a voice called out. Evelyn stepped forward toward a teller window. The nameplate read Greg Palmer. He couldn't have been older than 30. His shirt was crisp, and his hair gelled into an efficient part. He didn't look up as she approached. "Good morning," Evelyn said gently. Greg responded without eye contact. "How can I help you?" "I'm having trouble with my pension deposit," she explained, placing her paperwork on the counter. "It usually comes in on the 3rd, but it's not in my account." Greg's fingers tapped rapidly on the keyboard. "Account number?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small spiral notebook, flipping to the page where she'd written it down. "It's 144-39-9107, she said slowly, squinting at her writing. He typed, scanned, then shook his head slightly. "Deposit shows as processed on our end, but I checked this morning. It's not there." Greg sighed, his eyes flicking to the growing line behind her. "I need that money for my heart medication," she added, voice quieter now. "They won't release it without payment." "Our systems show no issues, ma'am," he said, finally glancing up. "If it hasn't arrived, you'll have to contact Social Security." Evelyn hesitated. "But I already tried. They hung up on me after 40 minutes. I just need someone to help me figure this out." Greg's fingers hovered over the keyboard, his expression already cooling. He'd heard sob stories before, dozens, maybe hundreds, but this one felt different, even if he didn't let it show. "Our system is working fine," he repeated. "If your deposit isn't showing up on your end, then the issue is on Social Security's side, not ours." "I understand," Evelyn said, trying to steady her voice. "But I don't know what to do. My husband used to handle all this before he passed. I'm still trying to learn. I thought maybe someone here could call for me, or check if the funds were delayed, or—" "Ma'am," Greg interrupted, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "There's really nothing more I can do. You're holding up the line." "That line again." Evelyn turned and looked. A man in a gray business suit checked his watch, sighed dramatically, and looked directly at her, as if she were the cause of his ruined morning. She turned back to Greg. "I've been with this bank since 1982. I opened my first account here with my husband, Harold. We bought our home right after, raised our daughter not far from here. I just need someone to listen." Greg's lips pressed into a thin line. "Let me get a manager," he muttered, but he didn't move. Instead, he bent slightly and pressed a small button beneath the counter. "I didn't ask for security," Evelyn said, suddenly aware of the tension rising. "I'm asking you to step aside so I can assist the next customer," Greg replied. "We've been over this. There's no issue on our end." "I can't just leave," Evelyn said, her voice cracking. "I need that money for my medication. I'm not trying to cause trouble." From the corner of her eye, she saw a uniformed man approaching. The security guard, Kevin, was young enough to be her grandson. He wore a polite but firm expression, the kind trained into people expected to remain calm while removing problems. "Is there a problem here?" Kevin asked, standing beside her. Greg answered before Evelyn could speak. "She's refusing to leave after being told we can't help her, disrupting the line." "I wasn't refusing," Evelyn said, blinking hard. I just wanted to talk to someone." "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me," Kevin said gently. "No," Evelyn whispered. "This can't be happening." The man in the suit behind her cleared his throat loudly again. "Some of us have meetings to get to," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Evelyn turned toward him, heart racing, face flushed with shame. "I didn't mean to hold you up, I'm just—" Greg was already calling, "Next customer, please." Kevin placed a hand lightly on her elbow. Evelyn looked around. No one intervened. No one said a word, just the low hum of fluorescent lights and the tapping of shoes on tile. She felt small, shrinking, unwelcome. She clutched her purse tighter and let herself be guided away. Kevin walked her to the doors, his grip gentle but firm. Evelyn moved slowly, her knees aching with every step, the humiliation stinging deeper than the cold. "Your umbrella, ma'am," Kevin said as they reached the entryway. He grabbed it from the stand and handed it to her. Evelyn's hands trembled as she fumbled to open it. The wind caught the fabric and nearly tore it from her grasp. Outside, the rain had worsened. Fat drops slammed against the sidewalk, pooling in the cracks and swirling around her worn shoes. Evelyn stepped out under the small awning, trying to gather herself. Kevin nodded once and returned inside, the glass door shutting behind him with a soft finality. She was alone. The weight of everything settled on her shoulders. Her chest tightened, not from the weather, but from the fear of not having her medication, of what might happen tonight if the heart flutters returned like they had last week. The bottle at home was empty. Her bank account was empty. And now, after being escorted out of the very institution she had trusted for more than 4 decades, she felt empty too. She looked around, hoping maybe someone had seen what happened. But no one approached. No one offered a kind word. People rushed by with umbrellas, coffee cups, and raincoats, never pausing. Evelyn turned toward the bus stop. It was a block and a half away. Each step sent a bolt of pain through her knees. She tried not to limp, tried not to cry. Harold would have hated to see her like this. He used to handle all the bills, the paperwork. Always said, "You take care of our hearts, Evie. I'll take care of the banks." That arrangement had worked for over 50 years. But Harold was gone now, and Evelyn was left learning too late how complicated everything could be. She shuffled forward, umbrella bobbing with each shaky step. Her coat was damp, her stockings were soaked through. Her purse felt heavier than ever. Still, she walked, pressing forward through the rain because there was no other choice. Across the street, on a bench outside a corner thrift store, a girl in a purple hoodie watched with wide eyes. She had seen the whole thing. Evelyn pleading at the counter, the guard stepping in, the cold dismissal. Her phone had been recording the entire time. The girl's name was Layla Grant. 17, high school senior, amateur photographer, daughter of the seamstress who owned the boutique next door. She knew injustice when she saw it, and what she had just witnessed had left a knot in her chest she couldn't ignore. As Evelyn reached the corner and paused to catch her breath, Layla stood up. She didn't know exactly what she was going to do yet, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this slide. Not today. Not after seeing that. Layla Grant couldn't believe what she had just recorded. Her phone was still in her hand, the screen wet with rain, but the red circle had captured every moment. She stared across the street at the elderly woman, now standing alone, her umbrella barely holding against the wind, her shoulders slumped with defeat. Layla had been waiting for her mom, who worked at the little tailor shop 2 doors down. She came there often after school, doing homework or helping fold fabrics while her mom fitted customers. Today was supposed to be just another rainy Tuesday, but that changed the moment she saw the security guard escorting the old woman out of the bank like she was a problem. Layla didn't know this woman, but she felt something twist in her chest watching her struggle in the rain. Something about the scene, the indifference, the silence, the way the people inside the bank had turned away, made her angry. She shoved her phone into her pocket and ran across the street, splashing through puddles without caring. "Ma'am," she called out, "wait up." Evelyn turned, startled. Her umbrella tilted to the side, letting the rain hit her cheek. "Yes, dear?" she asked, trying to steady the umbrella again. "Are you okay?" Layla asked, coming to a stop in front of her. "I saw what happened in there. That guy had no right to treat you like that." Evelyn gave a tired smile, trying to wave her off. "Oh, it was just a misunderstanding, nothing worth fussing over." "That wasn't a misunderstanding," Layla said firmly. "That was wrong. Here, let me hold this." She gently took the umbrella from Evelyn and held it over both of them as they walked back toward the nearby bench. "I'm Layla, by the way, Layla Grant." "Evelyn Moore," the woman replied. "Most people just call me Evelyn." "Well, Evelyn, you shouldn't have been treated like that," Layla said. "It was horrible." Evelyn tried to sit, but winced as her knees protested. Layla steadied her with a hand on her arm, easing her down slowly onto the bench. "Thank you, dear," Evelyn said, catching her breath. Layla pulled the umbrella down over both of them and sat beside her. The rain continued to fall, but now it felt like a quiet curtain around them, softening the world outside. "I don't mean to be nosy," Layla said, "but what happened?" Evelyn hesitated. Her instinct was to say nothing, to protect her dignity. But the girl's face held no judgment, only concern. "My pension check didn't come in," Evelyn finally said. "I need it for my heart medicine. I came to the bank to ask for help." Layla's jaw tightened. "And they just kicked you out?" "I guess I was holding up the line," Evelyn said quietly. "I've been with that bank since 1982. But none of that mattered. Layla couldn't wrap her head around it. "You were asking about your own money. That's not holding up the line. That's what banks are supposed to do, help people." Evelyn gave a small laugh, but there wasn't much humor in it. "It's not like it used to be. Back then, you walked in and someone would greet you by name. They'd ask how your garden was growing, or if your granddaughter liked the birthday card. Now it's numbers, speed, and screens. If you don't fit into their routine, they push you out." Layla shook her head. "It's not right." The wind shifted, blowing a fine mist under the umbrella. Layla pulled her hood tighter and looked over at Evelyn. Her coat was soaked at the cuffs, and her shoes looked older than Layla herself. The woman's hands rested in her lap, fingers stiff from arthritis. She wasn't just tired, she looked heartbroken. "Where do you live?" Layla asked gently. "Over on Sycamore Terrace, the senior apartment building by the community center." "That's kind of far from here," Layla said. "You took the bus?" "Yes, it's about 12 stops. I try not to make the trip often, but today felt necessary." Layla glanced toward the street, watching as a bus rumbled past without stopping. "Do you want to go back now?" I'll wait with you." "You don't need to do that," Evelyn said. "You've already done more than enough, dear." "I want to," Layla said. "Besides, my mom won't be done with work for another half hour, and I don't want you standing alone in this rain." Evelyn opened her mouth to protest again, then stopped. There was something about the girl's tone. It wasn't pity. It was something steadier, like respect. "I suppose I could use the company," Evelyn said softly. Layla smiled. "Great. Let me know when the next bus is coming. I'll help you get there." Evelyn fished an old flip phone from her purse. The screen was scratched, and the buttons worn from years of use. Layla watched as Evelyn clicked slowly through the bus app, struggling to read the tiny numbers. "Here, may I?" Layla asked, reaching out. Evelyn handed her the phone. Layla navigated the app easily and found the route. "The next one comes in about 8 minutes," she said. "Let's start heading that way." She helped Evelyn to her feet, keeping the umbrella steady over them both. As they walked, Evelyn's pace was slow but steady. "You really didn't have to do all this," Evelyn said as they neared the bus stop. "You're very kind." "I just did what anyone should," Layla replied. "If I were you, I'd want someone to step up." Evelyn blinked. "That's the thing. I used to think that too. But lately, I wonder if the world still notices people like me." "Well, I do," Layla said quietly. They reached the bus stop. A cracked wooden bench sat beneath the awning. Layla helped Evelyn sit again, then sat beside her. As the rain softened to a drizzle, the bus turned onto the street in the distance. Evelyn watched it approach, her shoulders sagging slightly, either from relief or exhaustion. "You said your husband used to handle the finances," Layla asked, keeping her tone soft. "Yes." Harold did all of that. He was steady, patient, knew how to talk to people. He passed away 2 years ago this spring. Since then, I've been trying to learn what he always did for us. She smiled faintly. "Turns out, it's a lot." Layla nodded. "My dad left when I was little, so it's just been me and my mom. She runs the fabric shop down the street. I see her do everything: work, pay bills, talk to banks. She says, sometimes the world gives you more than you should have to carry, but you carry it anyway." Evelyn turned her head, looking at her. "You're wise for someone so young." Layla smiled. "I just listen a lot." The bus squealed as it slowed to a stop. The driver opened the door with a clunk. Layla stood and reached for Evelyn's umbrella and purse, helping her up. Evelyn leaned on her arm for balance, moving carefully onto the first step. They found 2 seats midway down the bus. The air smelled faintly of wet coats and old vinyl. As the engine hummed, Evelyn looked out the window, then turned toward Layla again. "I didn't expect anyone to help me today. I thought I'd go home, make a cup of tea, and call the Social Security office again until they hung up on me." "You can still call them," Layla said. "But now you've got someone who'll sit on hold with you, if you want." Evelyn chuckled. "That's a generous offer." They rode in comfortable silence for a few blocks. Evelyn watched the city pass by. Sidewalks she used to walk more easily, buildings she remembered from decades ago that had since changed. Her voice came softly. "Harold used to say that dignity was like glass. Once it's cracked, you feel it everywhere, even if nobody else sees the break." Layla looked over. "What they did to you today was wrong, but you still carried yourself with dignity. I saw it." Evelyn blinked quickly, then looked away. Her voice caught. "Thank you." When they reached Sycamore Terrace, Layla stood first, then helped Evelyn off the bus. They walked slowly together to the apartment building's entrance. "This is me," Evelyn said, pausing near the door. "Apartment 3C. Thank you, again." "Do you have a phone?" Layla asked. "I'd like to check in on you later, just to see how you're doing." Evelyn nodded. Layla helped her save her number into the old flip phone. Evelyn smiled down at the screen. "Layla from the bank," she said. "That's how I'll remember." As Layla walked back to the bus stop, she took out her phone again. The video was still there, burning in her pocket. It was time the world saw what she saw. Layla sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, staring at the screen of her phone like it might explode. The numbers on the video kept climbing. 30,000 views, 50,000, 90. It had been just 4 hours since she posted the footage of Evelyn Moore being kicked out of the bank, and already it was spreading like wildfire. Her caption had been simple: "This woman just needed help with her pension." Instead, the bank staff kicked her into the rain. Is this how we treat our elders? The comment section was filling faster than she could read. Some were furious, some were heartbroken. Others shared stories of their own grandparents or parents being dismissed and mistreated. The message was clear. People were watching, and people were angry. Layla's mom knocked softly before opening the door. She carried a mug of chamomile tea and a folded blanket. "You've been staring at that screen for hours," she said gently. "Come up for air." Layla took the mug but didn't take her eyes off the phone. "It just hit 120,000 views, Mom. I think this is actually going viral." Her mom, Priya, sat beside her on the floor. "You did the right thing," she said. "Sometimes the truth needs a push." Layla shook her head. "I didn't think it would matter. I just didn't want her to go through that alone." Her mom reached over and pulled the blanket around her shoulders. "That's exactly why it matters." The notifications buzzed non-stop. Tags, shares, reposts. People were tagging the bank's social media accounts, demanding a response. Hashtags like "Justice for Evelyn" and "Elder Respect" were starting to trend. By the time Layla fell asleep just past midnight, the video had crossed 1 million views. When she woke up, her phone was still buzzing. She blinked against the morning light and checked the screen. 3 missed calls, dozens of text messages, and one strange notification sitting quietly at the top. A direct message from an account called Keanu's Circle, verified. Layla frowned. She clicked on the profile. It looked official. Blue checkmark. Dozens of posts about charity work, social causes, and updates tied to Keanu Reeves. The message was short. "Hi Layla, we saw your video. Mr. Reeves would like to get in touch regarding the woman in your footage. Please let us know if we can talk." Layla sat up quickly, heart pounding. She tossed the blanket aside and jumped off the floor. She wasn't sure if it was real, but the thought of Keanu Reeves seeing her video? That felt impossible. She walked into the kitchen, phone clutched in both hands. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "I think Keanu Reeves saw the video." Her mom looked up from the stove. "Someone from his team just messaged me. They want to talk." Her mom narrowed her eyes. "Could be a scam." "That's what I thought too," Layla said, "but they're verified." Priya set the spatula down and walked over to peer at Layla's phone. She scrolled through the account carefully, checking links, usernames, post history. "This looks real," she said after a long pause. "Professional graphics, consistent tone. And that's definitely Keanu Reeves in the photos." Layla's stomach flipped. She hadn't even had breakfast yet, and already her world felt like it had cracked open. "What do I say?" she asked. Her mom smiled. "You say thank you, and you ask what they want to do next." Layla sat at the kitchen table and tapped out a cautious reply. "Hi, thank you for reaching out. I'd be happy to talk. Just want to confirm this is legit." She hit send, then set the phone down. Her hands were shaking. 5 minutes later, a new message came in. "Completely understand. We'll have someone from our team call you within the hour to verify everything." Exactly 42 minutes later, Layla's phone rang. Unknown number, Los Angeles area code. She answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hello?" A calm, professional voice replied. "Hi, is this Layla Grant? This is Sophia from Keanu Reeves's outreach team. Thank you for taking our call." Layla swallowed. "Yes, that's me. We saw your video last night. Mr. Reeves viewed it around midnight and asked us to reach out immediately. He was very moved. Layla blinked, stunned. Wait, he saw it personally? Yes, Sophia said. And he asked if there's any way we can help the woman in the video. That's Evelyn, Layla said quickly. Evelyn Moore. She lives in a senior complex on Sycamore Terrace. She's amazing. Sophia's voice stayed warm but focused. Thank you for sharing that. We'd like to talk to Ms. Moore directly if she's open to it. Mr. Reeves prefers to handle situations like this personally, but only with consent. Layla nodded, even though Sophia couldn't see her. I think she'd want to talk to you, but I'd like to be there with her, if that's okay. Absolutely, Sophia said. That's actually what we were hoping for. Would you feel comfortable visiting her today? If she's willing, we'd love to arrange a call or a visit. Layla's heart pounded. A visit? Yes, Sophia said. Keanu is filming nearby this week. He asked if he could meet her in person if she's open to it. I think she'd be overwhelmed, Layla said. But yes, I'll go ask her. I'll let you know. After she hung up, Layla stared at the wall for a full minute. Keanu Reeves was going to meet Evelyn Moore. Her mom placed a hand on her shoulder. Looks like today's going to be important, she said gently. Layla nodded, already grabbing her hoodie and her phone. I need to go see her right now. Layla took the same bus route she had traveled with Evelyn the day before. The ride felt shorter now, though her nerves made every stop feel twice as long. When she arrived at Sycamore Terrace, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the sidewalks damp and glistening in the morning sun. She buzzed at the front door. Evelyn's voice crackled faintly through the intercom. Who is it? It's Layla, she said, from yesterday. I need to talk to you. Something kind of amazing happened. The door clicked open. Evelyn met her in the hallway outside apartment 3C. Dressed in a housecoat with her silver hair pulled back neatly. She looked more rested today, but still cautious. I saw the video, Evelyn said. My neighbor Gerald showed me this morning on his tablet. He said it's everywhere. Leela nodded, following her into the small apartment. I hope that's okay, she said. I didn't ask your permission before I posted it. Evelyn sat down slowly on the couch and gestured for Layla to sit beside her. You gave me my voice back, she said quietly. I didn't expect the world to care, but it's comforting to know someone did. Layla took a breath. There's more. Someone saw it. Someone important. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. A reporter? No. Keanu Reeves. Evelyn blinked. Come again? Layla tried not to laugh. I know how it sounds, but it's real. His outreach team contacted me this morning. He saw the video and wants to help you. He's filming a project nearby, and he wants to meet you in person. If you're comfortable. Evelyn sat back, stunned. Ellen wants to meet me? Why would someone like that care about my little disaster at the bank? Layla looked at her gently. Because you were treated unfairly, and because some people, famous or not, still know the difference between right and wrong. Evelyn took a long pause. I'm not used to this kind of attention. You don't have to do anything you don't want, Layla said, but I'll be with you the whole time. He doesn't want to make a scene. Just help. Evelyn looked across the room, her gaze landing on a photo of Harold on the end table. You think he's really serious? Layla nodded. They offered to schedule a private visit, just him, no cameras, no press, just a conversation. Evelyn's eyes welled slightly and she dabbed them with a tissue. Tell them yes, she whispered. If he truly wants to listen, then I'll speak. Layla smiled, reaching for her phone. I'll text them right now. As she sent the message, she felt something shift. The story had already reached millions, but the real change was just beginning. The late afternoon light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows in a quiet, modest Los Angeles home. Keanu Reeves sat alone in the kitchen, nursing a lukewarm mug of black coffee, staring at the pattern of shadows on the floor. His phone buzzed on the table. A soft knock followed. Tina, his longtime assistant, poked her head around the corner. Got a minute? She asked. Keanu gave a slight nod. Tina stepped in, holding her eye. "There's something you need to see," she said. He raised his eyebrows slightly. He'd been bombarded lately with emails and videos, most of which could wait, but Tina's tone was different. She set the iPad on the table and hit play. A grainy video began. A bank lobby. An elderly woman in a soaked raincoat, holding a purse with trembling hands. Her voice quiet. Her expression bewildered. Then the sound of her asking for help. A young teller's dismissive reply. A security guard stepping in. The woman being guided out into the rain. Keanu leaned forward. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He watched as the woman stood alone under a tiny awning, clutching an umbrella she couldn't open. Then he saw the girl in the hoodie run up. Her voice wasn't audible, but her body language said everything. The video ended with the caption, "Is this how we treat our elders?" Tina watched his face. His jaw had tightened. He didn't say anything at first. "She's gone viral," Tina said softly. "The girl who recorded it, Layla, she posted it 12 hours ago. It's everywhere." Keanu nodded once, but his eyes stayed fixed on the black screen. "He reminds me of someone," he said finally. Tina sat down across from him, sensing the shift in his energy. "My mom," Keanu continued. "Years ago, after my dad passed, she went through something similar. Not quite as public, but just as humiliating." Tina listened, not interrupting. "Me was trying to figure out the health insurance," he said. "I was filming in Prague at the time. I couldn't get back in time to help. And the bank, they treated her like she was confused, like she didn't belong." He rubbed the side of his face with one hand. It stuck with her. For years. Every time she walked into a bank after that, she'd double-check her purse 3 times. She didn't trust herself anymore. Keanu looked down at his hands, then at the cold coffee. Watching that woman in the video, Evelyn brought it all back. Tina waited a moment, then asked gently, "What do you want to do?" He didn't hesitate. "Find her. I want to talk to her. Should I go through the press?" "No," Keanu said. "No headlines, no media. Just her. And the girl who helped her." Tina nodded, already pulling out her phone. "I'll make it happen." Keanu stood up, walking to the window. And then, almost to himself, he added, "Some things you just don't walk past." Tina tapped through her contacts and pulled up the team's internal directory. She placed a call to Sophia, the outreach lead based in LA, and explained the situation with precision. "Mr. Reeves saw the video. He wants to speak to the woman." "And the girl who filmed it?" Quietly. No cameras, no press. Sophia responded immediately. "I've already flagged the girl. Her name's Layla Grant, 17, local student. She listed the woman's name as Evelyn in her post. We traced her to Sycamore Terrace Senior Apartments." "Good," Tina said. "Reach out to Layla. Confirm if Evelyn is comfortable with a direct conversation." "What's the time frame?" Sophia asked. "Today," Tina said, "if possible." She hung up and turned to find Keanu still standing at the window, watching the last orange streaks of daylight stretch across the skyline. "He's in a senior complex not far from here," Tina said. "They're confirming now." Keanu gave a slow nod. He had turned down 3 invitations this week for charity dinners and award events, but this was something else. Something that felt real. He walked back to the kitchen table, opened his worn leather notebook, and began scribbling quietly. He didn't always prepare for meetings like this, but something about Evelyn had stirred something long dormant. It wasn't just his mother's memory. It was something deeper, maybe even guilt. When his father died, Keanu had been old enough to manage, but not old enough to protect the people he loved from what followed. Watching his mother struggle in silence haunted him more than he ever let on. She had been proud, soft-spoken, smart. But when the financial world started spinning without her, no one had slowed down long enough to show her how to step back in. He thought of Evelyn, the way she had clutched her purse, the way her voice shook as she asked for help, the coldness she'd been met with, how easy it had been for people to look away. He flipped the page in his notebook and jotted one line: "Never mistake quiet for weakness." Tina returned a few minutes later. Sophia spoke to Layla. Evelyn agreed to meet. They'd prefer somewhere familiar. Her apartment. Keanu looked up. "Perfect. No press?" "None," Tina confirmed. "Layla and her mom will be there too, just to make her comfortable." Keanu grabbed his keys and stood. "No driver," he said. "I'll go alone." Tina gave a knowing look. "I figured. I've already sent the address to your phone." He gave a small nod of thanks, then turned for the door. Tina called out softly before he left, "Why this one?" Keanu paused. He didn't look back. "Because someone once helped my mother. A stranger. She never forgot it, and I never did either." With that, he stepped out into the twilight, ready to meet a woman who reminded him of someone he had loved and lost. Keanu drove himself, windows slightly cracked, letting the cool breeze push against the tension in his chest. The address led him through older neighborhoods, quiet streets lined with aged oak trees, modest homes, and rusted mailboxes that had seen decades of stories. When he pulled into the parking lot of Sycamore Terrace, he shut off the car and sat for a moment. He checked the time. Just past 6:30 p.m. The sun was low now, painting the building's beige bricks with a golden hue. Lights flickered on in the windows, each one holding a life behind it. He looked up at the third-floor corner unit, apartment 3C. He didn't know exactly what he'd say. That part always came in the moment, but he knew what he wouldn't do. He wouldn't talk down to her. He wouldn't make her feel like she owed anyone anything. He stepped out of the car and walked to the building, keeping his baseball cap low. The security keypad had already been cleared for him. When the door buzzed open, he climbed the stairs, slowly, intentionally. No entourage, no fanfare, just one person coming to listen to another. He knocked once. It was Layla who opened the door. She looked both nervous and excited, holding the knob like it might come off in her hand. "Hi," she said, almost breathless. "You're really here?" Keanu smiled gently, especially the employee. "I said I would be." She stepped aside, and Keanu entered the apartment. Evelyn sat on the edge of the couch, wearing a clean blouse and her hair pinned neatly. Her eyes widened as she rose slowly. "You must be Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "Keanu's fine," he replied, offering his hand. She took it. Her grip was soft but warm. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'm still not sure why you did." Keanu sat in the chair across from her. "Because I saw something in you I couldn't ignore," he said. Layla and her mother Priya sat nearby, watching but not intruding. "You reminded me of someone very important to me," Keanu continued. "Someone who also found herself alone after a loss. Someone who just needed help at a moment when the world didn't feel like helping." Evelyn's eyes softened. "That's kind of you to say, but I didn't expect anything. I only wanted to get my medicine." "I know," Keanu said. "And that's what made it so powerful. You didn't ask for anything unreasonable. You just wanted to be heard." For a long moment, no one spoke. The room held a quiet respect, like something sacred had entered it. Keanu leaned forward. "I'm not here to make a scene or post about this. I'm here because what happened to you should never happen to anyone. And if you'll let me, I'd like to help make that right." Evelyn blinked slowly. Her voice trembled as she answered, "Then let's talk." Evelyn smoothed her skirt again, even though it didn't need smoothing. Her hands were still trembling slightly, but not from fear. Something closer to disbelief. Sitting across from her, on her modest green armchair that squeaked slightly when he shifted, was Keanu Reeves. Not an assistant, not a spokesperson. The man himself. He had come with Layla and her mother, and he had walked in like he wasn't famous. No fuss, no sunglasses, no ego. Just quiet eyes and a soft smile. The tea in his mug was already going cold, but he hadn't complained. "I hope you don't mind, it's a little weak," Evelyn said, gesturing to the tea. Keanu took another sip and smiled. "Tastes like my grandmother's. She used to let the bag sit for hours." Evelyn chuckled, feeling the tension ease a little from her chest. She didn't know what she expected when Layla told her he was coming. Certainly not this. Not a man who seemed so human. "I still don't understand why you're here," she said. "You must have a million other things going on." Keanu leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. "I saw what happened," he said. "And it reminded me of something I never forgot. My mom, after my dad died, she went through something similar, not on video, but it stayed with her." Evelyn nodded slowly, eyes softening. "It's hard. Learning to do things someone else always handled. Harold always managed the accounts. He was the numbers person, I was the books." "Books?" Keanu asked. "I was a librarian," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. 38 years. First at the downtown branch, then the community one closer to here. I helped design the children's corner before I retired. Harold and we didn't have much, but we always had stories." Keanu smiled. "That explains the shelf by the window." Evelyn glanced toward the well-loved wooden bookshelf near the curtains. Most of the books were worn around the edges, dog-eared and filled with bookmarks made from old receipts or pressed flowers. "I couldn't throw them out," she said. "They've been with me longer than most people." "Books are the only furniture that makes a room feel like someone lives in it," Keanu said softly. Evelyn studied him. There was something gentle in his posture, something unhurried in the way he listened. "My husband, he wasn't a flashy man," she said. "Didn't care for crowds. He worked at the post office. Same window for 40 years. Knew every neighbor by name. He liked routines, simple meals, and fixing things that weren't quite broken." "Sounds like someone who left a real mark," Keanu said. Evelyn nodded, her eyes glistening. "He did. But people like that, the world moves past them too fast now." Keanu looked around the apartment. Every photo frame, every book, every trinket had been carefully placed. Then maybe the world needs to slow down. Evelyn let the silence settle for a moment. It wasn't awkward. In fact, it felt comfortable. The kind of silence that only happens when someone's really listening. She hadn't had a conversation like this in a long time. "I used to help people find answers," she said, "back before Google made everyone think they were their own librarian. Kids would come in asking about frogs or planets or wars, and I'd help them dig through encyclopedias. They learned how to look, how to wait for something to appear after patience. That's gone now." Keanu nodded slowly. "But you gave them something bigger than answers. You taught them how to ask the right questions." Evelyn looked down into her tea. "You're very kind." He smiled. "I just recognize what matters." Layla and her mom sat quietly on the other side of the room. Layla held her phone in her lap, not recording, not scrolling, just watching. There was a softness in her expression, a quiet awe that hadn't faded since Keanu walked in. Priya leaned toward Evelyn with a warm smile. "I had no idea you were a librarian. My fabric shop's just down the street from the library branch you mentioned. I used to take Layla there when she was little. She learned to read sitting in that children's corner you built." Evelyn's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Then maybe our paths crossed before either of us knew it." "That wouldn't surprise me," Priya said. "Good things tend to ripple like that." Keanu turned slightly in his seat, gently steering the conversation back. "May I ask something?" he said. "Of course," Evelyn replied. "What did it feel like in that moment, at the bank?" Evelyn took a breath. The room grew still. "Like I disappeared," she said quietly. "I walked in thinking someone would help me sort out a small mistake. I had all my papers. I even practiced what to say. But the moment I stepped up to that counter, I saw it in his face. I was already a problem." She swallowed, her voice tightening. "I wasn't angry, not at first, just embarrassed. I felt small, And when the guard took my arm, I realized nobody in that room was going to speak up. Keanu didn't move, didn't interrupt. I've lived here since 1972, she continued. I helped raise a community, but in that moment, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Layla looked down, her jaw clenched. I'm sorry, I didn't do more, she said softly. Evelyn reached over and touched her hand. You did more than enough. You saw me. Keanu leaned forward again, his voice low. And now the world has too. Evelyn met his gaze. That's not what I wanted. I just wanted my medicine. Sometimes the smallest moments hold the biggest truths, Keanu said. What happened to you speaks for so many others who don't have a Layla in the room. Evelyn sat quietly for a moment, holding Keanu's words in the space between them. Her fingers toyed with the corner of a coaster, worn at the edges from years of use. She wasn't used to being seen like this. Not as someone with wisdom or history, just someone who still mattered. I didn't expect any of this, she said finally. I thought I'd go home, make some soup, and wait for another long phone call with no answers. That's what most of my days have become lately. Layla shifted on the couch. You shouldn't have had to wait alone. Evelyn offered a gentle smile. I appreciate that. Keanu glanced around the room again. His eyes stopped on a small photo sitting beside the couch. A black and white picture of a younger Evelyn and a tall, gentle-looking man with tired eyes and a crooked smile. Harold? He asked. She nodded, and her smile deepened. My husband. We met at a community book sale. He was trying to find a war novel and kept mixing up the authors. I corrected him, and he said, well, guess I'll just marry you so you can fact-check me forever. I laughed in his face, but he came back the next day. Keanu chuckled. He sounds persistent. He was quiet about it, she said. Didn't talk much, but when he decided something mattered, he never let it go. Keanu nodded. Sounds like someone I'd like to have met. You would have liked each other, Evelyn said. You both believe in things you don't have to believe in anymore. Kindness, patience, listening. For a while they sat without speaking. Outside, the street lamps blinked on one by one, casting soft glows onto the sidewalk. The room felt full, not with noise, but with understanding. Finally, Keanu leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees. I want to do something about this, he said. Not just for you, but for everyone who's been in your shoes. No one should be treated like a burden just for growing older. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. What can you do? A lot, actually, he said. But I want to start by asking you a question. She tilted her head. Would you be willing to help us design something better? A new way for banks to treat their senior clients? Training, policies, even the way buildings are laid out? You know what's broken. Maybe you could help fix it. Evelyn looked stunned. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. You want me to help design bank systems? Keanu smiled. You were a librarian for almost 40 years. That's systems work. Categorizing, supporting, making things accessible. Who better? Evelyn blinked, touched a hand to her chest. I'm nearly 80 years old. Exactly, Keanu said. That's what makes your voice so important. Her breath caught. I thought my useful years were behind me. He shook his head. They're just beginning. Keanu's eyes drifted to the small shelf above Evelyn's television. There were a few framed photographs and what looked like a certificate tucked slightly behind one of them. He stood and walked toward it gently, not touching anything, just scanning. The photo that caught his attention first was of a man in military dress. He looked young, with a square jaw and a quiet pride in his eyes. The colors had faded, the edges yellowed, but the uniform was unmistakable. Next to it was a formal-looking document in a black frame. He leaned in to read it. It was a commendation from the State Library Association, recognizing Evelyn Moore for 40 years of outstanding public service. It had been signed by 2 state officials and dated 7 years earlier. Keanu turned toward Evelyn, his brows drawn. You were honored by the state? Evelyn glanced over, a little embarrassed. Oh, that old thing, yes, they gave me that when I retired. I never liked a fuss. And your husband, Harold, served in Korea, she said. Drafted at 19. He didn't talk about it much, but he wore that uniform with dignity. Keanu turned back to the certificate and shook his head slightly. I don't understand how someone with that kind of life behind them ends up being treated like they don't matter. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. I used to think respect came with age, but now I think it just fades unless someone holds on to it. He returned to his seat and sat down slowly, processing everything she'd said. You know, she added after a moment, I didn't just shelve books. I wrote grants. Every year. I had to prove why our programs mattered, why after-school reading clubs deserved funding, why we needed ramps or bilingual storybooks or weekend volunteers, and if we didn't explain it just right, the money went somewhere else. Keanu raised an eyebrow. You wrote grant applications? Hundreds, she said with a small nod. I knew every angle of every program, which numbers mattered, how to connect stories to data. They called it paperwork, but it was always more than that. Keanu sat back in awe. You weren't just running a library, you were designing systems to serve people. Evelyn shrugged gently. I suppose so. It just felt like helping. Keanu's voice dropped. That's exactly what I need right now, someone who understands systems. Someone who knows what breaks them and how to fix them. Spencer! Evelyn looked uncertain. What do you mean? He sat forward again, his tone serious now. I don't just want to get an apology from the bank. I want to redesign the way they, and places like them, serve elderly clients. And I can't do that from the outside. I need someone who knows how to build trust from within. She blinked at him, caught off guard. You're asking me to help you fix the entire banking experience for seniors? He nodded. Yes. I'm asking you to do exactly what you've always done. Give people access. Evelyn stared at him, speechless for a moment. The idea felt too big, too sudden. She had spent most of her life helping behind the scenes, quietly, methodically, never in the spotlight. And now Keanu Reeves was sitting in her living room, asking her to help fix something that reached far beyond her neighborhood. She glanced again at the certificate on the shelf, then down at her worn hands resting in her lap. I haven't written a grant in years, she said softly. I'm not as quick as I used to be. Sometimes I forget things. Keanu nodded, understanding. But you haven't forgotten how to think, he said. You haven't forgotten how to care. That's more than most people bring to the table. Evelyn looked over at Priya and Layla. The younger woman gave a small, encouraging nod. You don't have to say yes right now, Keanu continued, but I believe this initiative needs your voice. Not just for what you've lived through, but for what you still know. Evelyn exhaled, her voice trembling slightly. What would I even do? Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather notebook, the same one he'd scribbled in earlier that day. He flipped it open to a page filled with rough sketches and notes. This is what I've started, he said, turning it so Evelyn could see. A model for something I want to build. A program that ensures every senior who walks into a bank is treated with dignity. No long waits, no rushed explanations, clearer signage, flexible appointment times, and staff who are trained specifically for senior needs. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes scanning the handwritten lines. And you want me to help design this? I want you to help make sure it works, Keanu said. I can fund it, I can advocate for it, but I can't design it without someone who understands the user's experience and who knows how to translate that into practice. Evelyn tapped a finger gently on the page. This here, she said, pointing. Your idea about personalized banking liaisons for seniors? That's smart. But you'll need a scheduling framework, Something simple, maybe paper-based and digital, so it doesn't exclude anyone. Keanu smiled. Exactly. That's what I need. That kind of thinking. Evelyn sat back, stunned by her own instinctual response. It had been so long since anyone asked her opinion, much less needed it. Harold used to joke that my brain was a filing cabinet, she said. Guess there's still some folders left in there. I never doubted that, Keanu said gently. Evelyn looked down, her hands now resting a little more confidently on her knees. You really think people will listen to someone like me? They'll listen if I make sure they do, Keanu said. But they'll believe it if it comes from you. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then I'll try, she said. For everyone who's been told to sit down, stay quiet, and wait their turn. I'll try. Keanu closed the notebook slowly, his eyes still on Evelyn. Trying is all I could ever ask, he said. And you're already doing more than most. Layla shifted forward in her seat. So, what happens next? Keanu turned toward her. Next, I meet with the bank, but I want to walk in with a plan, not just a complaint, a proposal. Evelyn tilted her head, curious now. You mean you're actually going to speak to the people who did this? Not just speak, Keanu said. Challenge them, politely, publicly, with purpose. Evelyn raised her eyebrows. That doesn't sound like the Keanu Reeves people think they know. He gave a faint grin. I've found there's power in being underestimated. Priya stood and moved to the kitchen. I'll put on a fresh pot of tea. Layla followed her, whispering something about how surreal the whole evening was. Keanu and Evelyn stayed in the living room. I know this is probably overwhelming, he said, but I meant what I said earlier. When I saw you in that video, I didn't just see someone who was mistreated. I saw someone who still had something to teach. Evelyn looked down at her hands again. The hands that once sorted books, typed policy drafts, prepared lesson plans for visiting classes. How many times had she pushed her experience aside because no one asked? I used to train new librarians, she said, almost to herself. Taught them how to organize resources, write proposals, evaluate outcomes. She looked back at him. Are you thinking of doing this at just one bank? Keanu paused, then answered carefully. I want to start there, but no, not just one. This isn't just a bank problem. It's a respect problem, a design problem, a human problem. Evelyn nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing in thought. You'll need a senior advisory board. Not just me, different voices, different challenges, and a way to track results. You can't just implement feel-good policies. They have to stick. Keanu smiled, eyes lighting with energy. That's exactly the kind of thinking I was hoping for. She gave a short laugh. Then, I guess it's lucky for you I've got a file cabinet brain. They sat in a moment of mutual understanding. Then Evelyn's tone shifted. I don't want this to be about pity. It won't be, Keanu said. It'll be about power. Yours, and the dignity that should have never been questioned. The kettle in the kitchen began to whistle. Layla returned with cups and a small plate of shortbread cookies she'd found in Evelyn's cupboard. Priya followed with the teapot. As they poured and passed the cups around, the room didn't feel like a celebrity visit anymore. It felt like the beginning of something bigger. 4 people, across generations, planning something rooted in respect. Keanu lifted his cup toward Evelyn, to the librarian who never stopped organizing the world. She raised hers in return, and to the man who remembered how to listen. The next morning, the sun was barely up when Evelyn heard a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Keanu standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee from the corner cafe. Thought you might be an early riser, he said. He smiled, accepting the coffee with a quiet thank you. He stepped inside and glanced around the apartment. The air felt different than the night before, charged with something unspoken, like anticipation. They sat down in the living room, both sipping their drinks in silence for a moment. I've been thinking about something, Keanu said, and I want to ask you before we take another step. Evelyn looked up. I'd like you to come with me to the bank." Her fingers tightened slightly around her mug. "I figured that's where this might be heading." He nodded, but not for confrontation, not for anger. "I want to walk back in with you, not to demand an apology, but to show what dignity looks like, to show them who you really are, and to propose something better." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "I don't know if I can do that. I don't want to relive it. I don't want to feel that small again." Keanu set his cup down gently. "You wouldn't be going back alone. You'd be with someone who believes in you. And not just me. Layla and her mom want to come. And Tina's been working all night on a draft proposal for a senior guest initiative. We want to walk in together, with a plan, with strength, and with grace." Evelyn said nothing for a long moment. Her heart pounded louder than it had in years. "It's not fear of them," she said finally. "It's fear that it won't matter, that we'll walk in and nothing will change." "It will," Keanu said, "because you're not asking for special treatment. You're offering something they can't ignore. Solutions." He reached into his bag and pulled out a printed copy of Tina's draft. Evelyn took it with cautious hands, her eyes scanning the neatly formatted pages. The title read, "Respect and Accessibility, a Senior-Centered Banking Model." Inside were outlined steps for training staff, modifying procedures, and reconfiguring layout designs to better accommodate aging clients. And woven through it were quotes from Evelyn herself, words she had spoken the night before, now integrated as guiding principles. She looked up at Keanu, her voice soft. "This is good. It's a start," he said, "but it's only powerful if the right person delivers it." Her eyes met his, full of uncertainty but also something deeper. Resolve. "You really think they'll listen to me?" He nodded. "They'll listen if you speak, and I'll make sure they hear every word." Later that day, Tina arrived at Evelyn's apartment carrying her tablet, a neat folder of documents, and a respectful energy that matched Keanu's tone. She introduced herself with a warm handshake and immediately complimented Evelyn on her attention to detail after reviewing the initial proposal. "I've never worked with anyone who marked up a digital PDF with such precision," Tina said, smiling. "You could teach our whole team a thing or two." Evelyn gave a modest nod. "Old habits die hard. I used to redline grant drafts with red pens until the ink dried up." Keanu sat nearby, watching the exchange with quiet appreciation. They spread out across Evelyn's dining table, which was now covered in printouts, notes, and a large yellow legal pad. Priya brewed a fresh pot of tea. Layla took it upon herself to clean the whiteboard in Evelyn's hallway, writing out a simple title at the top, "Bank Plan." They worked together for hours. Evelyn suggested a phased rollout structure, starting with a pilot program at the branch where she'd been dismissed. She proposed staff roles focused on elder care and even drafted a checklist banks could use to assess accessibility. At one point, Tina paused her typing and looked up. "You've really done this kind of work before?" Evelyn chuckled. "For decades, just not for people who usually listened." Keanu leaned in. "Well, we're listening now." As the sun dipped low outside the window, Tina made a final adjustment and turned the screen toward Evelyn. "Here it is," she said. "The new version, with your edits and your voice." Evelyn read the title aloud. "The Evelyn Moore Senior Dignity Banking Initiative." She stared at it for a moment, unsure what to say. Keanu quickly stepped in. "It's just a placeholder. We don't have to use your name if you don't want to." But Evelyn raised a hand. "No, it's not that. It's just strange to see it, after everything." Layla piped up from the corner. "It's not strange, it's earned." Evelyn closed the document and nodded once. "I'll go," she said quietly, "to the bank. I'll walk in." Keanu smiled, not wide or showy, just full of calm encouragement. "Thank you. But I want to say what happened in my own words," she added. "Not from a script. I want them to hear it from me, plain." "That's exactly what we hoped for," Keanu said. Layla lifted her phone. Would you be okay if I filmed the return? Evelyn hesitated. I don't want to be a spectacle. Layla looked her in the eyes. You won't be. You'll be a voice. For every senior who's ever been dismissed. Evelyn thought about it, then nodded. Just don't zoom in too close on my wrinkles. The room filled with soft laughter, and the atmosphere shifted. The fear was still there, but now it was braided with courage. The next morning, plans were set into motion. Tina arranged a quiet meeting with the bank manager under the pretense of discussing an external partnership. Keanu didn't want to ambush them, but he also didn't want to give them time to spin up a press release. He wanted the conversation to be real, raw, human. Layla prepped her camera gear, charging batteries and clearing storage on her phone. She'd upgraded from her usual recording setup, borrowing a stabilizer from her school's media club. Her hands shook with anticipation, but her focus never wavered. In Evelyn's apartment, Priya helped her choose an outfit. Nothing flashy, just something that made her feel composed. They settled on a dark blue blazer she hadn't worn in years, pressed and cleaned the night before, and a silver pin shaped like an open book, her retirement gift from the library board. This makes me feel like I still have purpose, Evelyn said softly, adjusting the pin in the mirror. You never lost it, Priya replied. It was just waiting to be needed again. As they gathered near the door, Tina handed Evelyn a fresh printed copy of the proposal, bound and neatly labeled. For the manager, she said. And the regional leadership, one copy each. Evelyn took them carefully, as if they were sacred. In her hands, they felt like more than documents. They felt like evidence of value. They planned to meet outside the bank just before opening hours. Tina would go in first to confirm the meeting was still on. Keanu and Evelyn would enter shortly after. Layla and Priya would remain outside, capturing the arrival and any public reactions. Keanu insisted the interaction be respectful, but filmed. He wanted transparency. The drive there was quiet. Evelyn sat in the front passenger seat of Keanu's car, proposal folder on her lap, her hands folded over it. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, her breath slow and deliberate. You okay? Keanu asked gently. I'm not sure, she said, but I'm going anyway. That's strength, he said. No, she replied. It's memory of who I used to be, of what Harold would have expected from me. They parked 2 blocks from the bank to avoid a crowd gathering too early. As they stepped out, the morning air was crisp and the sun sat just above the buildings. A line of people was already forming at the front entrance. Some had phones, some had signs, but most had expressions of curiosity and quiet support. Layla approached with her camera already rolling. She gave Evelyn a small thumbs up. You look amazing, she whispered. Let's not overdo it, Evelyn muttered with a smile. Keanu turned toward her, adjusting the collar of his own simple jacket. Ready? Evelyn straightened her spine, held the folder to her chest, and nodded. I'm not here to demand anything, she said. I know, Keanu replied. You're here to remind them who you are. Together, they stepped forward, into a world that, finally, might be ready to listen. Evelyn stood on the curb outside Briar National Bank, her fingers wrapped tightly around the folder of proposals. The crowd had grown since they arrived. Dozens of people, neighbors, curious onlookers, a few local reporters, stood quietly, some holding coffee, others with phones at their sides, ready to record. Layla stood near the edge of the crowd, phone balanced on her stabilizer. She didn't speak, just gave Evelyn a small, steady nod from behind the lens. Keanu stood beside her, hands in his pockets, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His expression was calm, but focused. Tina stepped out of the bank's front entrance and walked toward them briskly. They're inside, she said. Managers in her office, security's by the door. I let them know you'd like to speak. Did they say anything? Keanu asked. They were surprised, Tina said. Nervous, but they agreed to listen. Evelyn exhaled slowly. All right, she said. Let's not keep them waiting. Keanu offered his arm. She hesitated, then looped hers through his, steadying her steps. The two of them walked toward the entrance, the the crowd parting silently. A few people gave encouraging nods. A woman near the front whispered, "Thank you," as they passed. Layla followed, recording the moment. When they entered the bank, the hum of quiet conversation stopped almost instantly. Customers in line turned to stare. Tellers paused mid-transaction. A ripple of recognition moved across the lobby. Behind the main desk, the security guard, same build, same uniform as the day Evelyn was escorted out, stood motionless. His face paled when he recognized her. Janet Kim, the bank manager, stepped out of her glass-walled office just as they reached the middle of the lobby. She was a woman in her mid-50s, sharply dressed, clutching a tablet. Her eyes flicked from Evelyn to Keanu and back again. "Mr. Reeves," she said carefully, "this is unexpected." Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He simply nodded once. "Thank you for meeting us. We'd like to speak to you about what happened here." "I was told this was a preliminary discussion," Janet said, casting a nervous glance at the phones being raised behind the counters. "It is," Keanu replied, "but I'd like to have it here, publicly." Janet blinked. "In the lobby?" "Yes," he said, "because that's where the harm happened." He turned slightly to Evelyn. "She was humiliated here, in front of strangers. I believe we should begin to fix it in front of strangers, too." The room was silent except for the low buzz of a fluorescent light overhead. Evelyn didn't speak yet. She stood tall, folder pressed to her chest, letting the moment land. The security guard took a cautious step forward. "Is there going to be a problem here?" Keanu turned to him. "No. Only a conversation, and I think you'll want to hear it." Janet shifted uncomfortably on her heels, clearly unsure of how to proceed. She glanced toward her office, then back at Keanu and Evelyn. "We usually handle sensitive matters in private," she said. Evelyn took a small step forward. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but unwavering. "So do most apologies. But what happened to me wasn't private. You let your staff throw me out in front of customers and cameras. This isn't about shame. It's about truth." Keanu looked at Janet. "We're not here to attack anyone. We're here to make sure this never happens again." Janet hesitated, then gave a small nod. "All right, let's hear what you have to say." Evelyn took another breath. The sound of phones recording was unmistakable, a low chorus of digital clicks and buzzes. She held up the folder. "This is a proposal, a detailed, workable plan for how your bank, and others like it, can treat elderly customers with the respect they deserve. It's based on years of public service, real experiences, and thoughtful collaboration." She handed it to Janet, who accepted it with both hands. Several of the tellers had stepped forward slightly, curiosity on their faces. Evelyn looked around the room. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 50 years. My late husband and I opened our first account here in the early 70s. We saved for our home, our daughter's school, and our retirement, all in this building." Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied it. "I came in last week because my pension didn't show up. I was worried, confused, and I needed help. Instead, I was treated like an inconvenience. I was dismissed, ignored, and escorted out because I was old and slow and asked too many questions." A murmur moved through the lobby. One elderly woman near the back dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I'm not here to relive that moment," Evelyn said. "I'm here to turn it into something useful." Keanu stepped forward now, his tone calm and deliberate. Her staff didn't recognize her, but she's not just someone's grandmother. She's a systems thinker, a grant writer, a former public librarian who served thousands, and she's willing to help you build something better." Janet looked stunned. She opened the folder and flipped through the pages. "This is very thorough." "Because dignity deserves structure," Evelyn said, "not just apologies." The security guard, still standing near the entrance, finally spoke. "I didn't know who you were," he said to Evelyn, eyes lowered. "I was just told to escort you out." She looked at him with a kindness he clearly didn't expect. "I know," she said, And I hope after today no one else will be told to do that again." The lobby fell silent again, not from tension, but from reverence. Keanu turned to Janet once more. "We're asking you to be the first branch to implement this, fully, visibly, with your name attached." Janet flipped through more of the proposal, eyes scanning Evelyn's clear formatting, hand-marked edits, and structured implementation steps. You could hear a pin drop in the room. Then she looked up, still visibly processing the gravity of what was unfolding. "This isn't just a set of ideas," she said slowly. "This is a roadmap." "It's tested," Evelyn said. "Not in a lab, but in life. What works? What doesn't? I spent 40 years seeing how systems either serve people or push them out." Janet looked from Evelyn to Keanu and then around at her own staff, many of whom now stood silently, listening. "And you want us to be the example?" "We believe you can be," Keanu said, "but only if you're willing to face what happened and help lead the way forward." Layla, still recording from just inside the door, caught every beat. She zoomed in as Janet looked again at the folder. As she paused, then quietly said, "I'd like to read it more carefully and speak with regional leadership." "You should," Keanu replied. "But you should also know this moment matters. People are watching. Not just cameras, but customers, your own team. They're not waiting for the perfect response, just an honest one." Evelyn gave a small nod. "The only reason I agreed to come back here was to make something useful out of a painful memory. This isn't about publicity. It's about purpose." Janet straightened her shoulders. "Then let's begin there. I want to hear more. Maybe not all today, but if you're willing, Ms. Moore, I'd like your help." Evelyn's lips parted in quiet surprise. After a moment, she said, "I'll help. But only if it's real, not just a PR campaign." Janet nodded, more sincerely this time. "Then let's make it real." A quiet applause started in the back, first from a customer, then one of the tellers, then a few others. It wasn't loud, it wasn't staged, but it was genuine, respectful. Keanu turned to Evelyn. "You just changed the atmosphere of this place." Evelyn looked around. Not one person wore the indifference she'd felt just days ago. There were no averted gazes, only attention, and maybe, finally, understanding. Layla stepped forward, still holding her phone. "Can I post this?" Evelyn looked at Keanu, then at Janet. Then she said simply, "Yes. Let the world see what accountability looks like." Keanu turned to Janet one last time. "Evelyn's not just here to relive something hard. She's here to shape what comes next. I'll support that, fully, publicly, but this is her space now." Janet extended her hand. "Then let's talk." Evelyn reached out and shook it. The same hand that once trembled as she was escorted into the rain now held steady. No fear, no shame, just quiet, earned strength. They moved to a corner table. Staff members made space. The cameras didn't matter now. Something bigger had begun. And outside, Layla's live stream hit 1 million views. The conversation at the back table was still unfolding when Janet received a quiet tap on the shoulder from one of her assistant managers. She leaned in, whispered something, and then nodded. "Ms. Moore, Mr. Reeves," she said carefully. "There's one more person who needs to be part of this." Keanu's eyes met hers with a steady calm. "Greg?" Janet nodded. "He's been in the back since your arrival. He's asked to speak. I want to make sure you're both comfortable before I bring him out." Evelyn glanced toward the teller windows where the young man had once stood, without looking up at her, without offering help, without seeing her as a person. "I don't need to hear him rehearse something from HR," she said. Keanu leaned forward. "Then let's make sure he..." Janet stepped away briefly and returned with Greg Palmer, the teller who had triggered everything, with a cold stare and an indifferent shrug. He walked slowly, his name tag still pinned to his chest, though his shoulders drooped now with the weight of public consequence. His face was pale, He looked younger than Evelyn remembered. They stood in the center of the lobby again. The attention returned. Phones were raised, but quieter this time. Less spectacle, more curiosity. Greg cleared his throat and unfolded a small note from his pocket. He began to read, voice flat. "I would like to express my sincere regret for the interaction that occurred." Keanu gently raised his hand. "Greg, no scripts, no legalese, just talk to her." Greg froze, eyes darting from the paper to Keanu, then to Evelyn. His mouth opened, then closed again. The silence hung heavy. Then finally he began to speak. "Without the script, I didn't mean to be cruel," he said, his voice low and unpolished. "I didn't even think. That day was slammed. I had a line out the door, my supervisor breathing down my neck to keep things moving, and when you came up, I just treated you like a problem to push through." Evelyn said nothing yet. Her eyes stayed locked on his face. "I didn't see you," he said. "Not really. I saw an account number, a delay, and something in me just shut down. I didn't think about who you were or what you needed. I just wanted the line to move." Keanu stepped in quietly. "And did it move, Greg?" Greg shook his head. "No, not after that. After you left, people got angry. Some walked out. One woman yelled at me. I didn't even know it had been recorded until someone tagged me the next day. I saw the comments, the footage. I saw my own face, cold, detached. I didn't recognize myself." "You were trying to meet a number," Keanu said. "But there's a cost to that kind of speed, and this time, she paid it." The lobby fell still again. Janet stood to the side, listening closely. Evelyn looked at Greg now. "I didn't come back to humiliate you," she said quietly. "But I want you to understand. For people my age, clarity isn't optional. Dignity isn't decoration. It's survival. If we don't feel seen, we stop trying to be." Greg's eyes dropped. For a second, it looked like he might say nothing, but then, softly, he asked a question no one expected. "What could I have done differently that day?" Evelyn inhaled deeply, considering the weight of the moment. Then she said, not with anger, but with quiet instruction, "You could have looked me in the eye. You could have said, 'Let's figure this out together.' You could have treated me like someone who mattered, even if the system didn't have answers right away. You didn't have to fix everything. You just had to listen." Greg's hands trembled slightly. His voice cracked as he responded, "I didn't know how to do that. I've never been trained to handle anything but transactions. No one's ever taught us how to slow down." Keanu stepped in, his tone firm but calm. "That's not just your fault, it's the system you work in. One that values speed over service, that forgets every person who walks through those doors has a story." He turned toward Janet, his voice still even. "Systems can change, but only when people admit they're broken." Janet nodded. "We're listening now." The crowd remained still, but something in the air had shifted again. The tension had drained, replaced by something heavier. Reflection. A woman in line, maybe in her 70s, raised her hand hesitantly. "I had a similar experience here last year," she said. "I left in tears, but no one was filming me." Another elderly man added, "Sometimes I don't ask questions because I'm afraid of being rushed, so I just go home and try to figure it out alone." Janet's face tightened with emotion. "I didn't know," she said, "but I should have." Greg looked back at Evelyn. "I'm sorry," he said again. "Not just for what happened to you, but for what I didn't realize until it was too late." Evelyn stepped forward and did something no one expected. She placed a hand gently on his arm. "Then learn from it, and help others do better." Greg nodded, swallowing hard. Keanu turned to the group of staff and customers now gathered more closely in the lobby. "This conversation isn't about assigning lifelong guilt. It's about responsibility, about learning what it means to serve people with respect." He turned back to Janet. "What comes next matters more than what happened last week." Janet looked again at the folder in her hands. Then let's make this the first of many conversations. And not just in this branch. She turned to Greg. I'd like you to be part of the training program we're developing, with Ms. Moore's guidance, if she's willing. Greg's eyes widened. Are you sure? Janet gave a small smile. You've seen what happens when the system fails. That makes you part of the solution, if you want to be. He looked to Evelyn, waiting for her response. She gave a single nod. Then we begin again, she said. The moment closed with no applause, no speeches, just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after something honest has been said out loud and finally heard. The lobby had quieted. Greg had stepped aside, still visibly shaken, but surrounded now by support rather than shame. Evelyn remained at the center, her presence no longer fragile, but grounded. Keanu turned toward Janet, his tone shifting. Clear, strategic. What happened here is a window into something larger. Banks across this country are filled with people like Evelyn. People who need more than speed and digital kiosks. They need eye contact, patience, respect. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a second folder, slightly thicker than Evelyn's. I want to show you something we've been building. Not just a proposal, but a blueprint. Janet took the folder from his hands and opened it. The first page bore the title, Respect Banking Project, Pilot Initiative. This program, Keanu continued, would start right here at Briar National Bank. It includes physical redesign suggestions, customer service retraining, and policy adjustments. But it goes deeper than that. It's about shifting mindset, about treating older adults as partners, not problems. Janet flipped through pages, her eyes moving faster now, absorbing the contents. Evelyn stepped beside her, gently adding context. There's even a section for online systems, font sizing, interface simplification, phone support with real humans. I helped draft that part myself. Keanu nodded toward her. She's not just the face of this, she's the architect. I'd like Evelyn to serve as the program's senior advisor. Paid, respected, and heard. Janet raised an eyebrow. That's a generous title. It's more than a title, Keanu said. It's a signal to every other institution watching. That experience matters. That people like Evelyn aren't just clients. They're experts. Janet hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the edge of a page that detailed potential costs, timelines, and staff hours. And how exactly is this being funded? Keanu met her hesitation with steady confidence. My foundation will cover the full cost of the pilot program, from signage to seating, from staff time to system updates. No cost to your branch, no risk, just a real chance to lead. Across the room, a few staff members who had been listening exchanged glances. One nodded subtly, another whispered to a colleague. Janet kept reading, silent for several moments. I'd need to run this up the chain. Keanu didn't push. He simply turned and gestured toward the front of the bank. You should also look outside. Janet walked with him to the tall glass windows. Outside, the crowd had grown. What began as a few curious onlookers had swelled into a full sidewalk demonstration. Signs now dotted the scene. Handwritten ones like Banking with Dignity and We Stand with Evelyn. Some held printed photos from the viral video. Others held umbrellas for elderly neighbors in the back. Local news vans were parked along the curb. One reporter was live streaming. Another was interviewing an older man in a veteran's cap who pointed toward the bank's front door as he spoke. Janet stepped back from the window, stunned. They're all here. For her? Evelyn joined them. They're here because they've all been here. Maybe not this branch, but this moment. Janet turned from the window, eyes still wide from what she'd just seen. Her mind moved quickly now, calculating policy concerns, regional oversight, and public relations angles. But something deeper began to override all that. This wasn't in any manual, she said quietly. I've run this branch for 10 years. I've handled audits, customer complaints, even fraud. But I've never seen anything like this. Keanu folded his arms. Because this isn't about policy breakdown, it's about moral vision. What kind of institutions do we want to be part of people's lives? Janet sat down on the edge of the front desk, still holding the Respect Banking Project folder. I've seen dozens of proposals from corporate. They're clean, vetted, sanitized, but this feels human. It's written from the inside out. Evelyn stepped closer. It is, because it came from people who've been shut out. Janet glanced at the senior customers still lingering in the lobby. One man wore thick glasses and leaned heavily on a cane. Another woman had tears in her eyes, her purse clutched tightly to her chest. Their faces weren't just watching. They were waiting. Keanu looked at Janet one more time. Someone has to go first, not when it's easy, not when everything's approved, but now, because this is the moment. Janet slowly stood. I'll do it, she said. We'll pilot the program here, starting immediately. Gasps and murmurs rippled across the room. Even Layla, still filming discreetly near the door, let out a small breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Keanu extended his hand. Janet took it. I'll notify regional leadership today, she said. And I'll tell them exactly why we're doing it. Evelyn smiled gently. Tell them you saw people, not just policies. Janet nodded. We'll need a kickoff team, staff to train, a communication plan. You've already got the first two, Keanu said, gesturing to Evelyn and Greg, who had stepped forward again, no longer hiding in the background. I'm not who I want to be yet, Greg said quietly, but I'd like to help get us there. Janet gave him a small nod. Then let's get to work. Outside, the crowd had begun to cheer, picking up on the energy inside. News anchors caught wind of the decision, sharing real-time updates. Social media posts exploded with hashtags like Bank with Respect and Evelyn Moore Initiative. Tina, watching from the side, sent a short message to Keanu's team. Confirmed, pilot launched. Evelyn accepted position. Layla lowered her phone and smiled at Evelyn. Everyone's going to know your name now. Evelyn touched her necklace, a locket she hadn't opened in years. Ashley, the employee, don't need to, she said softly. They just need to know they matter. Keanu looked at her with quiet admiration. And you just made sure they will. They stood together under the fluorescent lights of the same bank where she'd once been escorted into the rain, but now everything felt different. Not just because of cameras or celebrity, but because someone chose to see, and someone else chose to lead. The Respect Banking Project was no longer a proposal. It was a promise. The news about the Respect Banking Project spread faster than anyone expected. National outlets picked up the story within hours. Evelyn's photo appeared next to Keanu's in headlines across social media feeds and major news sites. Clips of her speech at the bank played on loop. Even financial industry forums began discussing the potential implications of the program. But with attention came scrutiny. That evening, Greg Palmer sat in his small apartment, scrolling through messages on his phone. Some were supportive, friends who knew he wasn't a bad person, co-workers who appreciated his honesty, but others were brutal. You're the problem. You should be fired, not promoted. How dare you be part of the solution when you caused the harm? Greg shut off the phone and sat in silence. The weight of public opinion was a heavy, invisible thing pressing down on his chest. He hadn't asked to be seen. Now he couldn't be unseen. The next morning he arrived at the bank early. Evelyn was already there, reviewing materials for the pilot rollout. She looked up when he entered, noticing the bags under his eyes. You look like you didn't sleep, she said. I didn't, Greg replied, his voice subdued. I've been thinking. He walked to the counter and set down a sealed envelope. What's that? Evelyn asked. My resignation, he said. This program deserves someone better, someone who didn't cause all this. Evelyn stared at the envelope for a long moment. Then, slowly, she pushed it back across the counter. No. Greg looked confused. I'm not trying to make this about me. I just think stepping down is the right thing. It's the easy thing. Evelyn said. But not the right one. Greg blinked, unsure of how to respond. You made a mistake, Evelyn continued, a serious one. But you've also taken responsibility, and you've shown up. That counts for something. I don't know if the public agrees, Greg said. Evelyn gave a small smile. Most of the public doesn't know what it's like to walk back into the place where they failed and offer to help rebuild it. But I do, and so do others. Greg looked away, his voice barely a whisper. I just didn't want to hurt anyone else. Then stay, she said, under my supervision. Learn from this. Help fix what you broke. That's how real change happens. He looked back at her, eyes wide. You'd really let me stay? Letting you, Evelyn said. I'm asking you. Greg took a deep breath, nodded, and reached out to take back the envelope. I'll do better, I promise. Evelyn nodded in return. Then let's get started. Later that afternoon, reporters gathered in front of the bank for an impromptu media statement. Cameras clicked, microphones crowded forward as Keanu Reeves stepped outside, calm as ever, standing beside Evelyn and Janet. A journalist shouted the first question. Mr. Reeves, why are you personally funding this program? Keanu looked out across the crowd, his voice steady and low. This isn't about me. It's about all of us deciding how we treat the people who built the world we live in. Our parents, our teachers, our veterans, our neighbors. If we can't see their worth, then what are we even building? Keanu paused, letting the silence do its work. The weight of his words hung in the air, drawing everyone into a shared sense of reflection. We talk a lot about innovation, he continued, but the real test of progress isn't how fast we move. It's who we leave behind while moving. A reporter asked, what would you say to those criticizing the teller involved in the incident? Keanu didn't look away. I'd say redemption starts when someone admits they were wrong and stays to help rebuild. Greg Palmer isn't running from what he did. He's standing with the people he hurt, learning, contributing. That's more than most of us are ever asked to do. Inside the bank, Greg listened from the lobby. He hadn't known Keanu would say his name. He wasn't sure he wanted him to, but hearing it framed that way, without shame, without blame, he felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of peace. A young reporter stepped forward next. Ms. Moore, you've become the unexpected center of a national movement. What do you want people to remember from all this? Evelyn adjusted her blouse, took a step closer to the mic, and spoke with calm clarity. I want people to remember that silence is never the same as dignity. I didn't speak up at first because I thought I didn't matter. Now I know that was never true. None of us should have to fight to be treated like human beings. Her voice caught for a second, but she didn't step back. I'm not a symbol. I'm a person. And this isn't about making noise. It's about making space for all of us. The crowd applauded, not with fanfare, but with deep respect. There were tears in more than a few eyes. Cameras rolled, but for once they didn't feel intrusive. They felt necessary. Janet stepped forward next. We're proud to be the first pilot branch, she said, but we won't be the last. What we've learned here is going to shape how we train, how we serve, and how we treat every single customer, especially those who've been forgotten for far too long. A flurry of questions followed, but Keanu politely signaled the end of the gathering. He placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's back and guided her away from the cameras. As they walked inside, Layla caught up with them. You were incredible, she told Evelyn. Like, hero-level incredible. Evelyn gave a soft laugh. Oh, I don't know about that. Oh, really? Layla insisted. People are already calling you the voice of reason. Someone just tweeted a quote of yours, and it's going viral. Keanu smiled. Looks like you're trending. Evelyn shook her head with amusement. I never thought the first time I'd go viral would be at 83. They reached the new service desk being installed just for senior customers. The paint was still drying, the chairs were softer, the signs easier to read. Greg joined them, holding a tray with fresh tea. "I thought you might want something warm," he said, a little nervous. Evelyn took the cup from him and nodded. "Thank you, Greg." As they sipped in silence, Keanu glanced around the room. Something real had begun here. Not a campaign, not a performance. A shift. One that started with injustice and grew into justice, shaped by courage, kindness, and people who refused to stay silent. The next Monday morning, the conference room at Briar National Bank looked very different from its usual corporate meetings. Tables had been pushed to the side, making space for folding chairs, props, and carefully labeled boxes. At the center stood Evelyn, clipboard in hand, reading over her handwritten schedule for the day. Staff began to trickle in, some curious, others skeptical. Greg was the first to arrive, followed closely by a young teller named Jasmine and an assistant manager named Ray. Even Mason, the security guard who had once escorted Evelyn out, walked in and took a seat quietly at the back. Evelyn greeted each person warmly, using names when she remembered them, offering a small nod of encouragement if she didn't. Keanu entered just before the session began, dressed in a simple jacket and jeans. He took a seat in the corner, unobtrusive but fully present. "All right," Evelyn began, her voice steady and welcoming. "Today isn't about numbers, it isn't about quotas. It's about perspective." She walked slowly across the front of the room and picked up a pair of thick lens goggles from a box labeled Vision Simulation. "We're going to start with something simple. I want you to see what it's like to try and read a banking form when your eyes don't work the way they used to." She handed goggles to each participant and gave them a mock check deposit slip, printed in small font. The effect was immediate. People squinted, tilted the pages, held them at different angles. Jasmine frowned as she struggled to read, even the first line. "This is impossible," she muttered. "Try filling it out," Evelyn said gently. The group began writing, their pens moving slowly, lines often drifting off the page. Keanu watched in silence, noting the frustration written on their faces. Evelyn remained still, letting the discomfort linger just long enough to leave an impression. When the exercise was finished, she asked one question. "How many of you would ask for help if this were your real experience?" Only 2 hands went up. Evelyn nodded. "And now imagine doing that while being afraid you'll be called slow, or worse, confused." There was a hush in the room. Next came gloves. Evelyn had brought several pairs that mimicked the stiffness and tremors of arthritis. Participants were asked to sign their names on a digital pad and remove a debit card from a tight wallet sleeve. Ray fumbled with the card for a full minute before laughing uncomfortably. "I'd probably just give up," he said. "Exactly," Evelyn replied, and then walk away feeling embarrassed. Or angry, or both. As the training progressed, Evelyn introduced other tasks, handling coins with reduced finger strength, walking short distances with weighted ankle wraps, listening to instructions through muffled headphones. Each activity came with a quiet lesson, not through preaching, but through experience. By the final exercise, the room had shifted. The energy wasn't skeptical anymore, it was humbled. Tellers looked at one another differently. No one was joking. Everyone was thinking. Keanu stood from the back of the room and spoke softly. "This," he said, "is the kind of education that changes more than service. It changes hearts. Because when you feel something, even just a glimpse of it, you don't forget." Evelyn nodded, pleased but not self-congratulatory. "It's not about guilt," she said. "It's about understanding. When you know better, you do better." Greg raised his hand. "May I say something?" Evelyn motioned for him to continue. "I used to think older customers were difficult, slow. I'd get impatient. I didn't see them, not really. Today I realized what I've been missing. This training, it's not just about empathy, it's about responsibility." Evelyn gave him a look of quiet pride. "That's exactly it. At the end of the session, each participant filled out a reflection form. There was no scoring, no judgment, just a space to share what they learned. Mason lingered after others had left, watching Evelyn pack up the equipment. "Mrs. Moore," he said, stepping forward, "can I help you carry that to your car?" She smiled and nodded, handing him the box of gloves and goggles. "I appreciate that, Mason." He paused, then added, "I wanted to tell you something. Yesterday, I helped an elderly man out of his car. He was having trouble with the curb and I walked him inside. Usually, I wouldn't think much of it. But afterward, he said no one had helped him like that in months." Evelyn looked at him, listening. "I used to think my job was about preventing trouble," Mason continued. "Now I think it's about preventing people from feeling invisible." Evelyn touched his arm, kind of protection of all. They walked together in silence, the box between them lightened by the weight of shared understanding. That evening, Keanu visited the branch again briefly to check in on progress. He sat with Evelyn for a moment in the break room while she sipped warm tea. "You did something powerful today," he said. "I didn't do it alone." Keanu nodded. "But it started with your story." Evelyn glanced toward the lobby, where staff were now speaking more patiently to older customers, standing a little closer, waiting an extra beat before asking for a signature. "It started with being seen," she said, "for the first time in a long time." Keanu leaned back in his chair. "And now others will see too, because of you." Outside, the sky was beginning to turn pink with the coming evening. Inside, the bank didn't look different to most passers-by. But inside that room, inside that training, something had changed. Not just in policies or procedures, but in people. The kind of change that stays, the kind that spreads. It started quietly. Phone call, a forwarded email, a message from a regional bank manager in Colorado, then another from a credit union in Oregon. Keanu's foundation inbox began to fill. Small banks, local branches, even national institutions were reaching out with the same question. How do we bring the Respect Banking project here? At Briar National Bank, the shift could be felt before it could be measured. Evelyn noticed it first in the way customers entered the lobby. Slower, more cautiously, but with eyes full of curiosity, not fear. They had seen the video. They had read the articles. They had heard that something had changed, and they wanted to see it for themselves. One afternoon, a woman named Bernice, dressed in a pink sweater with pearls around her neck, stepped inside, holding a printed news clipping about Evelyn. "Is this the place?" she asked quietly. Evelyn, seated behind the new senior services desk, rose to greet her. "Is..." Bernice nodded, her voice trembling. "I've been afraid to go to the bank alone since my husband passed. I always felt like I was in the way. But I thought, maybe here it'd be different." Evelyn smiled. "I think you'll find it is." Within days, more followed. Elderly customers from surrounding neighborhoods, then from across town. Some just wanted to open a small account. Others brought handwritten notes of thanks or boxes of homemade cookies. They weren't just coming for financial services. They were coming to be treated like they mattered. Behind the scenes, the branch began to look different too. Signs were redesigned with high-contrast lettering. Forms were reformatted with larger print. Chairs with arms and cushions replaced the sleek, rigid lobby benches. The glass doors were fitted with automatic openers. Greg worked alongside Evelyn on updating service scripts for tellers. Jasmine volunteered to lead new staff trainings. Even Ray, the assistant manager, began ending his morning briefings with reminders about patience, posture, and kindness. And every few days, a new bank somewhere in the country sent a request to Keanu's team for a digital copy of the Respect Banking Toolkit. They weren't just interested in branding. They wanted substance. They wanted Evelyn's voice. At home, Layla was keeping track of it all. What had started as a single post had grown into a blog she titled The Kind Counter. Each week, she wrote about what she saw. new customers, policy changes, and personal reflections on what respect really looked like in everyday life. Her posts began to circulate on parenting forums, on elder care pages, and in college discussion boards. Students reposted her writing. Teachers shared her stories in classrooms. Even a few journalists began quoting her entries in longer articles. Traffic exploded. Comments poured in from people across the country. My grandmother was treated like this last year. I wish she'd had someone like Evelyn. I work at a bank, and I didn't realize how much we've normalized rushing seniors. Thank you for opening my eyes. Layla, surprised and moved, kept writing. She interviewed Evelyn twice for blog features, took photos of the new waiting area, and began adding video clips of training sessions. With permission, of course. Her audience was no longer just followers. It was a movement. A week later, Layla sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, surrounded by notebooks filled with questions and quotes. Her mother passed her a cup of tea. "You've been at it since 6, Priya said. "Don't forget to eat." Layla looked up and grinned. "I just got a message from someone in Michigan. Their bank's trying to launch the same initiative. They want to interview Evelyn for their staff meeting." Priya smiled. "She'll say yes. She always does." At that same moment, Evelyn sat quietly at her desk in the back corner of the branch. An envelope rested in front of her, its return address written in careful cursive. It was from Karen Simmons, a fellow retired librarian she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. The letter inside was short but meaningful. "Dear Evelyn, I saw you on the news. I almost didn't recognize you, but once I heard your voice, I knew. We all knew. You haven't just helped seniors. You've reminded the world what grace and strength look like. Thank you for making us proud." Attached was a small Polaroid from 1986, Evelyn at the local library's front desk, surrounded by books, helping a child spell out astronaut. She held the photo for a long time. Her hand shook slightly, not from age, but from the flood of memories. Later that day, Mason approached her desk. "Mrs. Moore," he said softly, "do you have a moment?" Of course, Mason. He held up a printout of a security training module she had revised. "I've been reading this, and I think I'd like to be part of the next training session, not just as a participant. Maybe help lead a piece of it?" Evelyn's face lit up. "That's a wonderful idea. I've been thinking about how we greet customers when they walk in. Body language, tone, speed. I think we can teach that better." "You're already teaching it," Evelyn said, "just by how you've changed." Meanwhile, Keanu sat quietly in his home office, scrolling through the latest update from his foundation team. 47 banks had requested materials. 15 had committed to pilot testing. A few had already begun making physical changes. He picked up the phone and called Tina. "Let's plan something." "For the foundation?" she asked. "For all of them. The ones adopting the program. The ones asking questions. The ones trying." "What did you have in mind?" "A summit," Keanu said. "One that brings them together. Evelyn should speak. Layla, too." "You got it," Tina replied. "I'll start working on it today." That evening, Evelyn walked the floor of the bank slowly, pausing here and there to observe. She saw Jasmine offering a chair to an elderly woman, Greg taking the time to explain a form line by line, Mason holding the door open for a man with a walker. No one knew she was watching. That was the beauty of it. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about going viral or news segments or press photos. It was about what was staying behind, what had taken root. At closing time, she sat at her desk and glanced again at the Polaroid from the envelope. She set it beside a new photo, one of Layla, standing beside her at the pilot ribbon cutting. Side by side, 2 lifetimes of impact, 2 different ages, the same calling, to serve, to uplift, to see the invisible. The transformation had begun, and it wasn't stopping anytime soon. The auditorium lights were warm but dim. casting a golden glow across the velvet seats. Banners on the walls read National Summit on Financial Inclusion. Evelyn stood backstage with her speech printed in large font on thick cardstock, her fingers smoothing the top page over and over. She was wearing a soft navy dress with a brooch pinned just above her heart, a silver tree, a quiet nod to the past 6 months of growth. Her hair was neatly done, her posture upright, but her stomach churned. Keanu appeared at her side, dressed simply in black slacks and a charcoal shirt. No fanfare, no spotlight, just calm presence. "Last chance to bail," he said with a small smile. Evelyn looked up at him. "Do you ever get nervous?" she asked. "Every single time," he replied. "But the nerves just mean it matters." She took a deep breath. "That's exactly why I'm shaking." He glanced at her pages. "Do you want to run it one more time?" She hesitated, then nodded. Keanu stepped aside with her into a quiet corner behind the curtains, and she began reading softly. "I was humiliated," she read, "but what hurt most wasn't being escorted out of a building. It was realizing I didn't believe anyone would care." She stopped and looked up. "Is that too harsh?" "No," Keanu said. "It's honest. And that's why they'll listen." Backstage crew signaled the transition. Evelyn was next. Keanu walked with her to the edge of the curtain. "You're not alone out there," he said. "You're just the first voice in a crowd full of people waiting for permission to speak." She looked toward the light spilling onto the stage. "I hope I don't fall off the steps." Keanu grinned. "I'll catch you if you do." When they called her name, Evelyn stepped out into the lights. The crowd stood and applauded, politely but not excessively. She walked to the clear podium and adjusted the mic. The room quieted. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice trembling just slightly. "My name is Evelyn Moore. I'm 83 years old, and I've been dismissed more times than I can count." A few people in the crowd stirred. 6 months ago, I walked into my neighborhood bank to ask about my missing pension check. What followed was a moment I thought I'd spend the rest of my life trying to forget. She paused, steadying her breath. I was treated as a nuisance, as if I was wasting someone's time. Eventually, I was escorted out, not for yelling, not for threatening anyone, but for asking too many questions while old. There was silence, every eye on her. But what I thought was the end of my dignity turned out to be the beginning of something bigger. Behind the curtain, Keanu stood with arms folded, watching. He had heard these words during rehearsals, but out here, with the weight of truth behind them, they landed differently. I was helped that day not by a policy, not by a company, but by a teenager with a smartphone and a sense of justice. Her name is Layla, and she reminded the world that even the smallest action can challenge the biggest injustice. Soft applause followed. Evelyn continued, her voice steadier now. "In the days that followed, I found myself at the center of a storm I never asked for, but rather than turning away, I chose to step into the light, not as a victim, but as a witness." She turned a page slowly. "I worked in public libraries for 40 years. I wrote grants. I trained new staff. I helped people find more than books. I helped them find answers. And yet, in that bank lobby, none of that mattered. My value had been reduced to my wrinkles and hesitation." Gasps rippled across the room, but something changed. Not because I yelled louder, but because someone finally listened. That someone is here today. He sat in my living room, drank my weak tea, and reminded me what real respect looks like. The audience glanced around, expecting to see Keanu stand, but he didn't. He remained in the shadows, hands in his pockets. Evelyn pressed forward. The Respect Banking Project was born from that moment, not to make headlines, but to make room. Room for seniors who feel overwhelmed. Room for patience. Room for humanity. She paused, looking out across the faces in front of her. "I am not an exception. I am a mirror. For every older adult who walks a little slower, reads a little closer, and still wants to be treated like a person whose time matters. A man in the front row wiped his eyes. "I didn't reclaim my dignity by walking back into that bank," she said. "I reclaimed it by refusing to stay quiet about what happened." Applause began to build. She glanced briefly backstage. Keanu stood just out of sight, one hand over his chest. "I've trained bank staff. I've listened to their apologies, and I've seen what real change looks like. It looks like a teller slowing down to explain a form. It looks like a chair with arms, not metal benches. It looks like a woman who was once pushed out, now leading the charge for reform." She set her final page on the podium and looked up. "So if you're a decision maker in this room, I ask you to choose respect. Not because it's trending, not because it looks good in a press release, but because your customers, your parents, your neighbors, your future self deserve it." A long silence followed. Then the crowd rose to its feet. This time it wasn't polite. It was thunderous. People clapped, some with tears in their eyes. Others simply nodded, deeply moved. Camera flashes popped. Journalists scribbled furiously. But Evelyn didn't linger in the moment. She gave a small smile, bowed her head gently, and turned to walk off stage. Back in the wings, Keanu stepped forward. "You were incredible," he said. "I was terrified. You didn't show it." She looked at him with gratitude. "I still don't understand why you helped me." He shook his head. "You helped me, more than you'll ever know." She reached up and touched his arm. "We don't always get to choose how we enter history," she said. "But we do get to choose what we do once we're there." Keanu nodded. "And you just reminded everyone in that room exactly why their work matters." Together they walked off stage. No lights followed them, but something brighter had begun. A week after the summit, Evelyn returned to her quiet apartment with a suitcase full of notes, brochures, and thank you cards. She was still processing everything. The applause, the strangers stopping her in the hallway, the young woman from a Chicago bank who had whispered, "My grandmother went through the same thing." But it wasn't until she was back at her kitchen table, with the familiar hum of her old refrigerator in the background, that she allowed herself to breathe. Among the pile of mail waiting for her, one envelope stood out, cream-colored, handwritten, no return address, just her name, Evelyn Moore. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded letter and an old photograph. The photo was faded but intact, an image from another life. In it, Evelyn stood beside a display board decorated with children's book covers and hand-cut construction paper stars. Behind her, a group of parents and kids sat on folding chairs. She remembered that day, the library's spring reading kickoff sometime in the early 1990s. They'd partnered with local schools and a literacy nonprofit to help low-income families start home reading routines. Her eyes scanned the crowd in the photo. Some children looked bored, others excited. A few parents clapped. There was a woman near the back holding a toddler in her arms. Evelyn paused. The woman's dark hair was pulled back in a bun. Her eyes were sharp, her posture tall, and even in the grainy image, there was something graceful about her presence. She looked familiar, but Evelyn couldn't place her. Then she unfolded the letter. "Dear Ms. Moore, my name is Daniel Kramer. I saw your summit speech on television last week. The moment you said you were a librarian in Los Angeles, something sparked in my memory. I think we may have met once, when I was a boy. I dug through some old family albums and found this picture. That's you, I believe, at the reading kickoff event. My mother took me there. She always believed in literacy as a tool for dignity, and that day made a real impression on both of us. You gave me my first library card. You also told me I was a natural storyteller, something I never forgot. I grew up to become a teacher, then a children's author. I wanted to thank you. You might not remember me, but you helped shape who I became. That day mattered. Sincerely, Daniel Kramer. Evelyn's hands trembled as she set the letter down. The room was quiet, but her heart was loud. She picked up the photo again, staring at the woman in the back, the toddler in her lap, the way she cradled the child, whispering something in his ear. That woman. Evelyn turned on her desk lamp and studied the face more closely. A long-forgotten name floated to the surface. Patricia Reeves. It hit her like thunder. Keanu's mother. She'd come to the library with her son that day. Evelyn remembered now. The toddler had grinned when she gave him a book about airplanes. He'd held it tightly the whole time. She picked up her phone and called Tina, asking if Keanu might be available later. There was something he needed to see. Later that afternoon, Keanu arrived quietly, as he always did. No press, no entourage. Just a messenger bag over his shoulder and the look of someone who hadn't slept much but didn't complain. Evelyn had already set the photo and letter on her coffee table. He noticed the expression on her face the moment he stepped through the door. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Yes, just surprised. Sit, I need to show you something." He lowered himself onto her worn floral couch and she handed him the photograph. At first, Keanu studied the center, her, the table, the decorations. A soft smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "This is amazing," he said. "Where was it?" "Eastwood Public Library, 1991 or 1992, I think." He looked again. Then his eyes drifted to the background, scanning the crowd, and stopped. His brows furrowed. "Wait a second," he murmured. "That's..." He leaned in. Evelyn watched his expression shift, first confusion, then realization, then something deeper. "That's my mom," he said quietly. He didn't move for a moment, just stared. The memory hit like a wave. "I remember this day," he whispered. "I was maybe 7. She brought me to that reading event. I kept that book you gave me for years." He looked up at Evelyn. "You gave it to me, didn't you?" She smiled softly. "You were so shy, but you lit up when we handed you that book about aircraft. Your mom said you carried it into bed for a week." He chuckled, stunned. "That was my favorite book for a long time. I must have read it 100 times. Evelyn gestured to the letter on the table. "There's more. A man named Daniel Kramer wrote to me. He was in that same photo. He said I gave him his first library card and told him he was a storyteller." Keanu read the letter quietly, absorbing every word. When he finished, he leaned back, hands resting on his knees. "You weren't just helping people open bank accounts or borrow books," he said. "You were changing their trajectory." Evelyn's voice was steady but quiet. "I didn't know who you were back then. But I knew that little boy would remember that day." Keanu looked back at the photo. His mother's face. His younger self. Evelyn at the center of it all. "Do you know what this means?" he said, still a little dazed. "You helped shape the person I became long before we ever met again." Evelyn blinked, touched. "I suppose that's what libraries do, they link things." He nodded. "And maybe the universe links people the same way." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need filling, the kind that said everything. Keanu finally stood, holding the photo carefully. "Would you mind if I got this scanned? I want to frame it. Not just for me, for my sister, for our family." Evelyn nodded. "It's yours to keep." He paused at the door. "You know," he said, "people always ask me who my mentors were. I think I just found another one." Evelyn smiled, her voice tender. "We never know when we're planting something that will grow." As the door closed behind him, she looked again at the letter, the photo, and the memory brought to life. Some things come full circle. Some connections never really end. Sunlight poured through the wide windows of Briar National Bank. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. Where there was once a hurried stiffness, there was now a quiet warmth. Evelyn sat at a round table near the center of the newly redesigned Senior Services Lounge. Her hands rested calmly on a training packet as she addressed a group of fresh hires, all in their 20s. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I want you to remember," she said, "that every person who walks in here carries more than a balance sheet. They carry stories, grief, hope. And sometimes, just needing to be heard is more important than solving the problem on the first try." A young woman in the group nodded slowly, her notepad half forgotten in her lap. Across the room, Mason stood by the front desk, gently helping an elderly man who had forgotten his ID. There was no sighing, no rushing, just patience. In another part of the bank, a small camera crew documented the day's activities for a short public service feature. Layla, now a high school senior, stood at the edge of the lobby being interviewed for a youth leadership program. "I didn't think filming that video would do anything big," she said, tugging slightly at the strap of her bag. "But I guess sometimes doing one right thing can shake a whole system." The footage cut to Layla speaking at a local youth justice summit. She wore a simple maroon jacket and spoke with the easy confidence of someone who'd already witnessed change. "When I posted that video, I was angry," she admitted. "But it wasn't just about Evelyn. It was about how easy it is to ignore people when they stop being convenient." She reminded me that silence helps no one. Applause followed her words. Back in the bank, Evelyn walked the lobby with a clipboard in hand. She observed staff engaging with older clients at lower counters, using large font printouts, and walking slower when needed. One woman with a walker smiled as a teller offered her a warm cup of water while she waited. Small things, but meaningful. Later that evening, Evelyn sat at her desk, reviewing grant proposals for expanding the Respect Banking project to a regional level. Her fingers moved more slowly these days, but her mind was sharp. She glanced at a photo framed next to her laptop. It was the one Keanu had scanned, the one from decades ago. Her eyes lingered on the little boy holding the airplane book. A soft knock at the door pulled her out of the moment. Tina stood there, holding a small folder. "He's just came in from the Musk Foundation and 2 other regional banks," she said with a smile. "They're asking if you'd be open to mentoring their senior accessibility teams." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "More work? Tina chuckled. "Just more people finally listening." That night, Keanu's voice returned, not in person, but over video. He had recorded a short message to be played at the Community Appreciation Dinner. "We often think justice is something loud," he said. "Big speeches, marches, confrontations. But sometimes it's a quiet refusal to ignore someone, a simple act of paying attention." He looked straight into the camera. I watched Evelyn turn a moment of humiliation into a movement of dignity. I watched Layla turn a shaky phone video into a global conversation, and I realized the biggest changes often begin with the smallest acts. Keanu's voice continued, soft and steady. "Dignity doesn't have to be earned. It only needs to be remembered. And remembering is something we can all do. Whether we're behind a teller window, holding a camera phone, or just choosing to slow down and ask, 'How can I help you today?'" The screen faded into a soft montage. Evelyn standing beside Mason, guiding him as he practiced a new onboarding session for senior clients. The way he listened, took notes, and nodded with quiet humility showed how far he had come. Layla in a school library, presenting to a class of middle schoolers about media advocacy. Her slideshow included a single image, Evelyn sitting tall in front of the bank. The caption read, "Never underestimate who you're standing up for." Outside the bank, a row of accessibility ramps had been installed. The marble floors were now treated for slip resistance. A small station with magnifiers and headphones sat by the entrance. All Evelyn's ideas, all now real. The next image was a conference room. Keanu sat beside Evelyn as she signed an expansion agreement for the Respect Banking project to be implemented in 7 more cities. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote her name, but her eyes were clear and sure. Then another scene. Keanu in a quiet garden, kneeling to place a flower beside a plaque that read, "In honor of those who gave their wisdom quietly and were finally heard." The voiceover returned for one final message. Maybe the systems don't break all at once. Maybe they shift when someone like Evelyn refuses to be invisible, when someone like Layla refuses to stay quiet, and when we, all of us, choose to stand beside them. A slow fade returned us to Evelyn's living room. She sat with a cup of tea, reading a letter from a young banker who had just finished the training course she'd designed. It ended with one line: "You helped me see my own grandmother differently. Thank you." She smiled, folded the letter, and tucked it into a small wooden box filled with others like it. A knock at her door. She opened it to find Layla and her mom, holding a small cake and 3 paper plates. "No cameras," Layla promised. "Just dinner." Evelyn stepped aside with a grin. "Then let's eat. And maybe you two can help me pick out a dress. They've asked me to speak again next month, in Chicago." The screen dimmed, and Keanu's voice returned one final time. "So, now we ask you, have you ever seen someone stand up for what's right when no one else would? Share your story below. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if you have a story you think I should tell next, drop it in the comments. You never know. Your idea might be the next one that changes everything." A soft piano melody played as the screen faded to black. Then, in white letters, "Because respect isn't a policy, it's a choice. And it starts with you."